Hey everybody, I am Sarthak Kaul and this is True Calling. I recorded this conversation back in March with Nikhil Sahni. Nikhil and I have known each other since high school, and when I received the media file for this podcast, it turned out that it had been corrupted. So all we had at the end of it was the audio files, and that's sort of what you will see being played here. But a little bit on Nikhil. Nikhil Sahni is an AI engineer with a background in computer science and artificial intelligence from the University of Illinois. After spending 7 years in the US, including 3 years working in the field, he recently moved back to India to start Bynd. Bynd is building AI native software to dramatically enhance market intelligence and transform the daily workflows of investment firms. I hope you all enjoy.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting, like how many more marathons have come up. So I feel like one of the things I haven't seen in India is with the heat, like the amount of electrolytes you probably need or lose.
Yeah.
I have not seen a single like electrolyte brand that sort of like comes to
Really?
mind.
So
Like, what comes to mind when you say, except the one that I gave you last?
so I mean, interesting you say that. So it's not weather conducive, right? Like any of these activities that we see are prevalent in big cities. But there are a lot of upcoming ones. Like Fasten Up is one that comes to mind immediately. I think they started with just these like electrolyte tablets, right? Which is I think something that you gave me at the time. And you just drop those into water, becomes an electrolyte, you drink it. And that was good. And now they are sort of moving to bottled beverages, right? So they have a Gatorade equivalent, better for you beverage, no sugar, a whole host of ingredients, some research. The promoters are like fairly well respected.
Do you know more about the background of the promoters?
No, so I mean, but what I do know is that like they have significant market share that they're encroaching on in this space. So that's one that I've heard of. But I mean, as such, obviously you have your Gatorades and stuff. I find them to be somewhat cost prohibitive for the masses. They're like, 60, 70 rupees a bottle, I think now. I don't know. I don't remember the last time I bought like a Gatorade. But I think there's also this like, people are understanding that, high sugar content in these drinks. Obviously, you need some sugars and electrolytes, but, excessively high sugar content in these drinks, artificial coloring, artificial flavoring, people want to stay clear of some of these things now, more cognizant of it. So I think, there's a lot of players in the market who try to come up with these electrolyte beverages. We've seen it in the US a lot with Liquid IV, with LMNT and like all of these.
You've tried them?
Yeah, I've tried sort of all of them. So I actually had this like health issue after COVID.
Okay.
Where I would get like low blood pressure.
And when you would get up, you'd feel like fainting?
Yeah. And like all of that. And like high heart rate and stuff to make up for it. And so I had to like go down on this deep dive of electrolytes in the US. And I finally settled on like LMNT, and I started with Liquid IV, but then there's just like too much sugar and I had to have it every day. If I didn't have it, I just felt completely off.
Wow.
And so every day I woke up in the morning, I would have to have it. At the gym, I would have to have it another time. And there was like a marked difference and my doctor prescribed it. He was like, you need to take extra salt. So even when I would eat food, I would putting extra salt in it. So LMNT was one that I really liked. That sort of worked for me really well. So that was like my consistent, daily regimen type things. And so obviously I was looking for that in India. But before I came here, I brought back boxes of electrolytes because I didn't trust whatever I would find here. So I was like, you know what, I will, I'll just carry a bunch of these back, and then if I go to the US again or if someone's coming back, they'll bring some for me.
Yeah.
So interesting you bring that up because this is like very personal issue that I have to like resolve. And I don't use bottled beverages.
Okay.
I use like a there's this brand called Thorn. They make supplements.
Yeah.
And so they also
You
have
researched your supplements, that means.
Oh yeah, I mean, like they have this electrolyte formulation called Catalyte, and that is like that is something that really works for me because the flavoring is nice. It's like not overly sweet, overpowering. It's like almost just like a light lemonade. Not much sugar. It's very easy. It comes in a box. You put a powder, scoop into water, and mixes easy.
You get it here in India?
I don't know if Thorn delivers to India. I'm sure they do with some duty or something. But I just brought back a crate of like 6 boxes. And so like literally I had a suitcase where I had to bring this back because this is like crucial for my day. Like I can't function if I don't have it.
So you have electrolytes every day right now?
Yeah.
And without that, you feel like pretty
I have
uneasy.
to. Yeah. I think it's like a mild form of POTS, which is like something that happens after COVID. It's like a long COVID type thing. I couldn't figure it out for really long. I saw like cardiologists, endocrinologists, like a bunch of doctors, every gastroenterologist, every single specialist doctor, which by the way in the US takes forever, right?
That's its own topic altogether.
Right, that's its own topic. But the health anxiety that comes with it, all of that. So, finally we settled on this one thing, this vague little, blood pressure issue. And they were like, you just need to keep your salt intake high. And so that's why I was like, you know what? I feel fine in the winters in Chicago. But as soon as the spring, summer starts rolling around, I just start feeling woozy. And so he's like, you know what? It's probably because it's hot out. You need more salts. Just add more salt to all your food. I just, the average sodium requirement for people that is set is like not high enough for you. And so you need to like supplement with sodium.
Right.
So I was just going crazy with it. Like hella salt and everything. Like, just electrolytes. So, that seemed to work.
That's super funny you say that because I remember, so a lot of my friends after COVID had the exact same thing.
Really?
Like a lot of people, like mostly girls, by the way. Like I met a bunch of women who like were like, hey, I like have this fainting feeling whenever I wake up or like get up suddenly. I feel like that. And then when I'm out in the heat, I normally instantly feel like I'm about to faint.
Yeah.
And every one of them said they have POTS once I went to the doctor.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys are watching, just have salt, right?
Yeah.
Literally, I mean, I was looking for some complex solution to a complex issue, but it turned out to be a very simple solution to a very complex issue. And then obviously you have to supplement the supplements with the lifestyle changes, right? Like I think there was initially I couldn't even go to the gym. Like I would go to the gym, I would feel faint after 5-10 minutes of work. And so that sort of put me off it. I was like, I don't want to harm myself, right? I don't want to go to the gym and end up in a situation where it's like, this is a heart rate situation, right? It's the engine of the car. You can't mess with it. And so I'm like, okay, I should probably take it easy. And so I just didn't work out for a while. And that didn't make it better. If I would go work out after 3 months, it would be equally bad or worse.
Interesting.
And so spoke to a bunch of doctors and the, I guess, overwhelming advice was that you do need to work out and this is how you should work out. Do things like don't go on a Peloton bike, like use a recumbent bike where you're like, a little bit more horizontal.
I see.
So don't sort of be vertical where you allow your blood to like pool in your legs, which causes a drop in blood pressure. So do like things where you're horizontal, like you're lying on a bench or, things like that. So it was a whole thing. Like for a year and a half, I was like trying to figure this thing out.
Wow.
And in the US, that's its own stories. I couldn't come back because I just got my H1B. And so like coming back to India to see a doctor was like not feasible. I would have 100% done it, by the way.
Yeah.
Because like over there you see a doctor. So I go for my initial checkup and they're like, let's get these tests done. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's get these tests done. And they're like, okay, actually like come back, 3 weeks later, we'll get these tests done. I was like, okay, 3 weeks. So I go back after 3 weeks, they get the test done. And they're like, actually, you should probably see a cardiologist because this seems to be like a him problem. I'm like, okay, let's see the cardiologist. And they're like, actually, he's booked out for like the next 3 months. Yeah, I'm like, this is, if there's something wrong in 3 months, it won't matter.
Yeah.
Right? So like, let's get this thing fixed now. But, the health anxiety of waiting 3 months when you have like, your echocardiogram, EKGs, scans, everything done. And you're just sitting with your reports, waiting, calling doctors in India, figuring out what it means. And like, while there was reassurance from people that things are fine, it's like, seeing it or hearing a doctor tell you that himself physically or herself physically, it's a different feeling, right? And so a lot of anxiety there. But finally, I did meet with the doctor. He said things were okay. And now I'm much, much better off than than back then.
Dude, I didn't know that this was that deep actually. The entire by the way, I gave you electrolytes completely out of like just you were drunk probably the last night, and then I was like, hopefully he needs electrolytes.
Yeah, this is the day after my birthday, I think. But
Yeah.
but no, electrolytes, dude. I've been deep in the electrolyte scene.
Dude.
Like, this is a life issue.
Wow. There's so many ways to take this conversation because I mean you brought up something personal, so there's something else. So I asked your brother to Akhil to give me a story that he knows of you, like that kind of like encapsulates your personality in some way.
Really?
Yeah. And
Okay.
and what he gave me, I'll just play it out. Let me know if you can hear it, by the way.
So the only stories that instantly come are usually fights with your big brother growing up over stupid stuff or major character development that they're caused by bullying you. But I think when I think deeply, there's an instance that I'll really remember and credit him for, as well as something I tell a lot of people. But during COVID, I was dealing with really bad mental health problems for the first time in my life. I was a teenager and I was in school and dealing with things kind of that my family, like my parents, didn't understand the most, even though they tried to. But because of lockdown, I couldn't get out and I felt like no one else could relate. And he kind of created a safe space for me to talk to him about it, to find solutions. And he's someone that's very practical, always to me, and a very sciencey guy, and does his research. But this showed me that like he has a great emotional quotient as well, and he lifted me up. And I was at a stage where I was literally not eating at all. I'd lost all my weight. My mental health was horrible. I wasn't able to make music the way I like to. And he made me read solutions in a very firm way as well as in a caring way. And when it came from him, it always meant more because he's my elder brother, and kind of you never have those intimate and vulnerable moments with them. So I was at a point where I was literally 47 kgs at 5'9" as like a 17, 18-year-old boy, and he helped me with my diet. He helped me work out in COVID at home every single day, even when he didn't want to. And just to set an example for me, just to kind of lift me out of what was probably one of the darkest times for me, that when no one else was there. And that's a story that I hold really close to my heart and shows his heart and personality, even though he comes off as a hard ass and has a very cold face and is very sciencey and doesn't really show this side of his much. But we made do with anything at that time, actually. There was no gym, there's nothing open, so we used like guitar.
So, do you remember this time?
Of course, yeah. This is like start of COVID.
You know, he said you come off as very sciencey, and I mean, I've known you since school, and like there was like I remember this. I don't know how true it is anymore for you, but like there was a part of you which was always like interested in like the science aspect of it, but then you were very much like you could become friends with anyone. Like you were like that kind of a guy that could like go, and that doesn't come really from like being analytical about everything, I feel like.
Right.
Where does this like what do you think has shaped you to look like from the outwards as like a hard ass? Like what has led to that?
I don't know, man. Like, I don't know what I come across as. Like, I haven't thought about it that deeply. Like, I don't know what I know what first impression I make most of the time, because people usually who have been friends with me for many years are like, the first time I met you, like, this is what I thought, right?
Which
and
is
so
what
that's
normally?
so usually it's some version of like, very serious, pensive. Like, I don't know. I really don't know. Judgmental. These are just some words that may have come up. But then they're like, oh, like, after we became friends with you, you like opened up and was sweet. And I think that's partly on me, right? Like that's like, it takes me time to warm up to people. And it's like, if I am, having a conversation with somebody, if I'm really opening up with them, it's probably because I'm close with them, right? Like, and so, like I like small talk. I don't mind it.
Yeah.
But maybe I come across as like uninterested because of my face, like resting bitch face. But I don't know. But the other part of the question that you asked was, what do I think has led to me being able to sort of switch around? I think part of that is that when I was in school, and this is hindsight, so I'm thinking back to it, I always had like very mainstream hobbies, but fairly diverse set of hobbies, right? And so I was class 8, 7, 8, I was like super into the Rubik's Cube scene. So I would go for like Rubik's Cube solving tournaments and like speed cubing and all this stuff, right? And then class 9 onwards, I was like really into the MUN situation, right? All throughout, I guess, 5 to 12, I was always into football, right? I was there was some other side hobbies. Like there was this one time where I was into music. Like I was playing the guitar, making like EDM music, like the Avicii era. Right?
Oh, really?
Like obviously there was Tiesto, Avicii, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this seems cool. Like let's try a hand at it.
Uh-huh.
So I think I was always very curious about very disparate things, and now that I look back on it, my peer groups when I was doing each of those activities was very different, and there was very little overlap. Of course, there are exceptions, but the same people who were doing MUN were not the ones who I would find on the football pitch, or I would find in these cubing competitions or whatever, right? Or in the music room. And I think while I was doing these things, I may have just picked up on like certain nuances of different people, and that just stems from some curiosity. But I'm not sure. I think it's a good and bad thing, right? Like I never really went super deep into to any of these fields, so it's not like I was the best footballer, or best debater, or best anything. But I sort of got this like broad base of knowledge about these things, and I think today that lets me pick up on nuances of new sort of fields much quicker. And so that I think has like really served me well in some ways, and in other ways, that depth is lacking.
Is
So-
there anyone that you looked up to during school?
during school? I mean, like my parents. There was no, I guess, one figure in my head where I was like, man, I really look up to this person.
Yeah, you want to be more like him or her.
Yeah, like there were parts of personalities I would pick and choose. So I'd be like, oh, this senior who's like doing this thing, like, that seems cool.
What
That's
were you
the
interested
classic.
in that time? Like, what was that? Do you remember?
This stuff only, like there was MUN stuff, debating stuff, people were studying for SATs, college. So, somebody was studying for class 10, 12 board exams. Somebody was playing football. So there was just, different parts of different people's personalities that I would look up to, where I was like, that seems like a good thing to have in your toolbox. And so maybe try to imbibe some of that. But as such, I don't think there was a central figure beyond my, immediate family. Yeah.
Was there any clear intention behind, like, for example, for me, when I think about my decisions to go to the US for college,
No.
it was so blind. It's amazing to look back and go like how little I actually thought about the repercussions of that decision
Yeah.
and what that leads to and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So was there a conscious decision to move to the US?
So, not at all. It was just kind of going with the flow, right? A lot of my closest friends at the time were studying for SAT. They were studying for SATs because our seniors were studying for SAT and their seniors were studying for SAT. So I think that sort of just propagated down. And it was just the thing to do at the time. Like you would hear about these kids getting into really good colleges and, doing all these amazing things. And I don't know, it just seemed like there was a world out there that you wanted to be a part of. And that was the extent of the consciousness in this decision. Like there was no, oh my God, like pros and cons list, US, India, UK, Singapore, right? Like it was always just, I was interested in tech. I wanted to study computer science. I knew there were some good schools in the UK, Imperial and all that. But I did know that, primarily in the US, we had some of these great institutions. You definitely want to be a part of them. And one thing that I guess did influence this decision a lot was that in class 10, my best friend and I went to the US to Georgia Tech for a summer.
Okay.
And we were there for a summer doing this like course on artificial intelligence. And this is back in class 10. And we had done the first version of this in class 8, which was in Mysore and Bangalore.
That's
It was
2013,
through-
basically.
I don't know. Yeah. But that was through Duke University. It was called Duke Tip, the program. And so,
Oh.
yeah. And so we did the first one in Mysore. That was a great experience. It was like summer camp with like smart people, really fun. Classes were whatever, but it was just a fun experience. And then the next one was like, you guys get to go to the US and do this thing at Georgia Tech. And, we had not heard that much about things that go on at this university, but we went there. The infrastructure is amazing. It was my first time in the US. I had not been to the US before that. So that was a big deal at the time. And just being in that environment, studying, our TAs were people who were either at a different university in that ecosystem or at Georgia Tech itself. And, they were really great people to look up to. The ways they taught us some of these concepts were really interesting.
Do you remember what you learned at that?
Yeah, but I mean, what do you teach a 10th grader about AI in 2016?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it was the basics. It was the beginnings of, what AI was back then. Today, AI is, it's a completely different word almost from what people understand of it today and 2016. But back then, it was introductions to, Turing machines, logic, systems like that. And we'd never seen things be taught that way. Our computer science class was, the curriculum was somewhat structured, but questionable. And so when we went there and we had the same stuff, it was like really, really interesting. So I guess that did, reinforce this idea that yes, this is the right place. I would love to be here. Living in a dorm with friends was really fun. All these activities, extracurriculars, class, the rigor, all of that was really fun. So this idea of academic excellence combined with, all of this other stuff in your life was like this novel idea, because in India it was very unidimensional.
Yes.
If you are
Still is.
Yeah, I mean, you're studying for FITGI or engineering college, like you go to engineering college, you do engineering, but there's no conversations around anything else. It's just it's a thin stream, right? And so that to me always felt very like restrictive. And I didn't like that. And so it was never, I guess I did not consider the Indian engineering path at all. And my grades in school were not like insane or anything. So DU and everything was not really an option. So you can say that I was not smart enough to get into the best schools here. So I was like, I can get into a good school in the US, so I'll do that.
Yeah.
So I guess that was the reasoning.
How did the 4 years there shape you? Like, what do you think is like one big lesson you kind of? It's a very simple question, but there's probably so many other lessons you probably have learned.
So I think the 4 years there, more than academically, more than anything, it was just an eye opener to like what's going on, right? Right. When you're over here, you're sort of restricted to Gurgaon, maybe the internet, whatever exposure you have, but the on-ground reality and the exposure you get is insane. I think if you are a top engineering university in the United States, the exposure to brilliance in faculty, the exposure to brilliance in your peers is just phenomenal. Like there is nothing like it on earth, I think. Like that ecosystem of being surrounded by people who've just done insane things just gives you a sense that it's possible, right? Like you are studying in the building where the transistor was made. Like that's insane, right?
Is that actually in UIUC?
Yeah.
Okay.
The smartphone was made, YouTube was made, right?
Wow.
In these dorms. And so just being in that ecosystem is ridiculous. And you will see an elevation in what you think is possible, even academically, because you will be going for the hardest course, right? You will be grinding, 100 hours a week studying for your test or getting one assignment done. And that same assignment, you will see this Asian kid you've never seen in class.
And we'll never see again.
And he will, turn up half an hour before the assignment is due, finish it. And a lot of the assignments had a leaderboard, right? Like if you're building a machine learning model, the accuracy score was your leaderboard. Or your recall was your leaderboard. And top of the leaderboard, done and dusted, and go back to building whatever crazy thing he was building. And you would study for weeks for exams.
Yeah.
There would be kids who would walk in, finish halfway through, kill it, and leave. Like, and that just gave you a sense of the delta. And I think that was also when I realized that, okay, like if you want to be the best at something, pick something else, because this is far gone, right? And so
did you kind of take it like there's two reactions to that sort of environment. I feel like it's like one is like, holy shit, I can't do shit, like this is insane, I probably can never be like that. And the other is like people getting inspired by that and just finding something that they can do. How did you sort of take it? How did you take that information?
Both.
Okay.
While I was there,
the
first, which was that, holy shit, this is like really hard. Maybe I'm not meant for this. Maybe I should have just studied finance or like marketing or so. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. But why am I doing this? Like, what am I proving to who? But the hindsight was, which is like now, I guess. And when I graduated from college, post-COVID, a lot of introspection during COVID for everybody. was that no, you got into the school for a reason. It was not a mistake. Like they didn't accept you by mistake, right? You completed coursework. You have a good GPA, right? And so you have earned the right to be there among those peers, those very same peers, and that delta in intelligence or whatever you want to call it just became more inspirational than anything. And so that perspective shift took time to happen because freshman year, new environment, new everything. It was not like that, and it was like fairly negative in my mind.
Yeah.
But to turn it positive now, when I look back on it, it's 100% positive, right? But I think it was a transition. It was not like I come in and I'm like, wow, this is amazing.
What have you realized about two things? One, so your brother and my brother are in the same grade,
Right.
so 4-year difference.
Yeah, I met him recently.
Yeah. What have you? I mean, you probably talked to a bunch of other kids there too, that were your brother's age, right? I would assume that you've met some people that. Is there anything you've noticed about their proclivity towards or like away from education, how they think about college?
I think my sense of what's going on in, I'll say their generation, even though they're, I guess, our generation, but it feels so distant. Like the change that they've undergone in these 4 years is just crazy. So I'll say their generation. The change I'm seeing in their generation is that like there is excellence. Like there are people who are brilliant, right? And there are probably more of those now than there were in our time. It's very hard to get into these colleges. It's getting more and more competitive. The SAT averages, I'm guessing, are probably moving a little bit higher.
2410 out of 2400.
Yeah, like the requirements have gone crazy. We saw it a little bit in school ourselves, where the cutoff for SRCC was the talk of town during boards, and it was like when we were in class 6, it was like 94, 92%. And just kept inching up. By the time we were in class 12, what was it, like 99%?
99.9.
Yeah, like,
yeah.
So, like, this, whatever. So we were like, this is not happening.
Yeah,
so why even bother about this whole
Yeah.
thing? So it's just kind of dismissive, right? But I think now there is obviously a lot of excellence in their generation. But what I'm seeing is a lot of the middle of the bell curve is being exposed to alternate career paths a lot more through the internet and content consumption, right? And so you are consuming a lot of content from content creators, which is now a viable path, right? To live a life and do whatever you want to do. There are people who are self-employed and, running a creative agency or a digital agency or, a podcast studio. And so there are all of these alternate career paths that are very viable, highly lucrative, because the amount you can scale these things to is just, it's insane. Like it did not exist 20 years ago.
The more people that get access to the internet, the more people that watch any of these platforms, the higher the content creators can potentially make. So
yeah, exactly. And so the ceiling is very high on a lot of these things now, right? Like earlier, if you were a barber, right, you were a really good barber, and you were better than all the other barbers in the barber shop, right? Like you would maybe earn 20-30% more than the other barbers, 50%, 100% more, right? But today, right, you start posting your cuts on Instagram, you start getting testimonials from customers, you start posting creative reels and content. Man, the sky is the limit. You could be the most famous haircut guy in Gurgaon and like be called by celebrities, cricketers here, there to the house. You're being flown with them to their matches, right? And so that is like now a reality for a lot of people. So if you're really passionate about something, you're really passionate about sneakers, right? Like, dude, 30 years ago, what business on sneakers, right? Today, online shopping, reels, TikToks, advertise, everything. And so that has now become like, there's a kid who just made like crazy money. He just sells sneakers. He resells sneakers in India, right? It's like, I think our age, like, you maybe a little bit younger. So the bulk of the bell curve is seeing that as aspirational now. It's not like I want to be a consultant at McKinsey. It's like, man, if I can just become like a crazy influencer, this could all be sorted.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
how realistic is that?
Man, I think it's realistic. Like, I mean, I personally can't do it. Like, I don't think I have the talent or anything special to offer on that end. But for the people who do have the talent, like, you can give it a shot on the side now while you're doing a job or whatever you're doing. Like you don't have to make it 100% focused.
Yeah.
Like there are girls who are really interested in skincare, makeup, passionate about it. Just start posting random reels of, makeup reviews, how they're doing their makeup, skincare product reviews. And it just blows up. Like people just relate to something, or the way you're saying it,
Yes.
or, the sort of nuance you bring into your reviews, how authentic you are. All of that matters. And so I think it's very realistic. But at the same time, it's very different from academic rigor.
Yes.
It's a completely different, framework of how you get there. And so I don't know, their generation has a ton of options, but when you're at a grocery store and there's 50 cereals to choose from, it's not always great, right? Like, you give me 2 cereals, I'll pick one,
Yeah.
and your life is simpler.
Yeah.
But now there's a lot of complexity, but a lot of choices. And so, I don't know, that's the shift I'm seeing in mindset. Is like, I can be that, I want to do this, I will do this. Unconventional stuff is picking up a bit more than even in our grade.
For sure. Also, there's a different conversation to be had, I think, which is, I think a lot of the people that are trying to shoot for this are trying to shoot for like extravagant sort of stuff. Like the highest, like biggest content creator that I can be.
Yeah.
Like that, and looking up to those people, right?
Right.
But I think there's a huge long tail of creators that are already existing that make enough money to like take care of everyone in their family.
Yeah.
But I don't think that part is talked about enough. It's most people normally are looking at this like short tail of like
For sure.
people that go all the way out, like
For sure.
more conversation to be had about, okay, you can actually make 200K, 100K, like, and that is more than enough for most people in India, for example, even.
Of course. That is life-changing money in India for most professions. Right?
Exactly.
Like, if you're talking bulk of the population, right? You are the best chef who makes like the greatest prawn curry. Like, I am sure that you will find an audience for it if done the right way, and then you'll sort of branch out to different curries, and like you'll just be the most famous prawn curry guy on Reels.
Dude, you might just be the most famous prawn
In
curry
the world.
guy in Hyderabad, and you still make enough, like, even for that sector of people, you could probably make enough money to survive.
Yeah, how you monetize it. People want to order from your restaurant. They're like, we saw it with Salt Bay, right? Like, he just makes steak, sprinkle some salt on it. Like, that is the early signs of, seeing some of this stuff materialize and sort of see that it's real.
Yeah.
And so I think more people see that it's real. Their parents are seeing it's real.
Yeah.
Right? The parents are purchasing products that are being marketed to them by younger influencers.
Yes.
Right? And so they're like, why did I buy that? Okay, well, this seems like a real thing.
Yeah.
How much are they making? Really?
Yeah.
And so I think that has like let some parents also be more lenient with, not just engineering, finance, doctorate. You can try your hand at a few of these things.
Yeah. I want to switch the conversation to you then from that perspective. Like, I think there's a very similar, like, content creation and business follow very similar principles in some ways, with the hardest part in both being the ability to actually start and keep going. I think majority of these people that want to do that, myself included, for a long time, I wanted to like start this thing for like a good 2-3 years. Like, and I was like, it was a fear of not being able to, again, going for this, like shooting for the stars thing. Like, I need to get everyone to watch this thing, but it's more so just like, I need to be able to ask questions to people that I'm interested in talking to and generally enjoy the process of it. So what was it that sort of made you actually make the decision to start this company? And then we'll talk more about it actually.
So I'll tell you when I figure out the starting part myself, because I was in the process of figuring it out, right? It's been about 2 months. But on the reason for starting the company, I think it comes from a few different places. So one is that, like I said, when I was in school, I was seeing all these savants in all my classes. I kind of knew, right, that being a programmer, like there is a ceiling for my capabilities in that realm, right? If I want to be unidimensional, want to be a SWE at like a big tech company, there's like a ceiling I'm going to hit there, right? That is not my core forte. And so I was like, okay, so then what are my options? I'm fairly technical. Like I don't think I'm the best engineer, but I'm a good engineer. And so what can I do with this, right? And the second was, I've always had interests that are like outside of tech, right? I've always known that I don't want to be hardcore tech throughout. Like everybody who knew me in college also knew this about me, that, it was maybe at times it was the conventional, let's do an MBA after tech and then get into finance or one of these fields. But I think I quickly realized that that was not it either. I did want to stay close to tech. I did not want to completely let it be. It just felt like it was a really important moment in tech as well. Like I said, class 10 onwards, AI was like sort of ubiquitous in all the coursework that I was taking part in. When I went to college, my specialization was in AI as well. A lot of my elective classes were in AI. I still think it was light and introductory stuff, and I don't think I was amazing at it, but like that exposure was there, and I knew that there was something really solid that was going to be happening in that space. And now with LLMs and everything, it just felt like the timing was too crazy to leave tech, right? And so I could not do that. So my gut feel was that this one step that we've taken with progress in LLM technology is really powerful. I definitely want to leverage it. At the same time, I'm the only engineer in my family, so everybody else comes from a finance background. My mom was in investment banking. My dad was in private equity. My chachu was a CA, and so just surrounded by that growing up throughout. All dinner table conversations about that. You hear about your parents' meetings and everything, right? And so just little things as well. So I was growing up around that throughout. I was always interested in public equity markets. I was like trading as soon as I got a social security number, buying stocks, losing money, making a little bit of money, getting excited, right? And so that's how it started. But finance had always been this like one core passion of mine, professionally, and as a hobby. And so combining the two was always very exciting. So the companies I was applying to, Stripe, SoFi, a lot of these like fintech,
I see.
sort of closer to finance, but still very technical type companies. Citadel, a lot of the hedge funds are in Chicago. They recruit heavily from UIUC. So those are like the dream jobs above even the fangs of the of Silicon Valley and beyond, because those are just highly sought after, highly paid jobs. But again, not smart enough to be a quant at like a big hedge fund, right? And so I was like, okay, that's also out. And so really,
do you ever think of being a PM?
Yeah, I did. I was like, you know what, PM would be really cool. I could like, manage this product. But I spoke to a lot of PMs, and the reality of being a PM was very different from what I had in mind, right? PM in my mind as a 17, 18-year-old was like, you'll be Steve Jobs and you'll like make products and tell people what to do and they'll like happen, right? But after speaking to a lot of people, it was like a lot of long hours, which is fine, but a lot of long hours spent in meetings and like, program management and product management and like running sprints and doing all those things. So that part was like, I was like, okay. So the finance and tech thing combined was really interesting. And my dad was visiting me in Chicago. He was having his meetings. I was seeing a lot of them. A lot of question marks in my head about the way they were doing certain things and certain processes and workflows. I was like, we can probably fix that. And so just built like a few basic prototypes, spoke to a lot of people in the industry. So, I mean, I have the privilege of like having a network in the industry, at least back home. And so a lot of people in the industry trying to figure out what it is that they do. These people say they work 100 hours a week. Where are those 100 hours going, right? And so a lot of those hours were being spent on inefficient data parsing type workflows, working with a lot of unstructured, semi-structured data. So that's where the idea for Bynd stemmed from, where we were like, okay, we can probably automate this, but why has nobody automated this yet, right? And so we looked at it, and the problems are really hard because every firm in financial services is different, every geography is different. And so to generalize one software solution across all of these is very hard. But that being said, with LLMs, it has now become possible to generalize beyond your typical automation type workflows, right? And so you're like, let's give this a crack. And obviously we're still working on product. But that's where the idea came from. And the vision was that we can basically eliminate or at least streamline a lot of these workflows that people across the globe in financial services are doing on a daily basis, right? And so that was the big idea.
Are you pursuing Indian clients or US clients?
So one great thing about finance or financial services is that fundamentally, if you go down to the bare fundamentals of financial analytics and how you value a company, how you look at the financials of a company, yes, there are different accounting standards, but by and large, those fundamentals stay the same, right? Fundamentals of value investing, fundamentals of the kind of analyses you do in from LA to Tokyo, it's fairly similar, right? Homogeneous. I can't say the same for sectors like healthcare or law or things that have these nuances, heavily regulated. So within the investing space at least, or equity research, or even investment banking to some extent, the processes are fairly standardized in terms of how you analyze a company, right? And so that lets us think global from day one. Like, we don't want to be confined to, let's build something in India, test it here, then take it out. I do want to think about this as a global product from day one, both in terms of, the market it serves and the standard it sets. And so, yeah, I don't think this is like a India test and then US situation.
Any interesting feedback or insights you received when you were talking to a bunch of these people in PE? Like, anyone that really kind of like shaped it, okay, this is exactly why I'm doing this sort of thing?
So I think a lot of people we spoke to, across the breadth of financial services, spoke to bankers, we spoke to equity research people in corporate lending, private equity folks, everybody, right? And I think the prevailing sentiment that instilled a lot of confidence in us was that all of them felt like a lot of time was being wasted. So, right. And so they did feel like what they were doing at that time was unimportant, right? And they would rather focus on more strategic things or have time freed up for them, right? Like, nobody wants to spend 6 hours on a Friday night, your boss calls you at 8 p.m. to like fix a deck, for example, right? Or to put together this memo, IPO's coming, we have 2 days, we need to throw together this like 8-pager. Right. So there was a lot of that anger or frustration, and everybody loved their jobs. But that part of it was like, very, people were always very, very talking about it. It's like, we like the job, we don't mind the long hours, but the monkey work is like really annoying. And so that prevailing sentiment was what gave us a lot of confidence that this is a problem that wants to be solved.
Interesting. So I want to ask you one of the more details about your observations about India versus US, like working in both these places. What have you noticed? We were just talking before this started about if you were thinking, if I would have started this company in the US versus starting this company in India, or living in India versus US, how would your lifestyle have been different? I think there's a lot of people that are, honestly, myself included, that are like thinking about this question of being in the US and starting something for everyone, for the like a global market, versus being in India. What are your thoughts there?
So a lot of deliberation. So I think I kind of always knew that when I would do my own thing, it would be in India. Because very comfortable market, home ground advantage. In fact, there's a lot of unfair advantages we have here, right? Like, I come from a privileged background, and that unfair advantage is fairly comfortable. And to not use it when I'm already doing something so hard, to do it in a market like the US, hyper competitive, I don't know anybody, start from scratch. Yes, I can do it. But at 25, I was already making a big step to sort of leave my career, leave my H-1B visa, whatever, move back and do this thing. And so I didn't want to add another layer of, complexity on top of it and be like, yeah, I'm going to do it in the US, right? And maybe I will go back at some point. But today, I think India was just a much better market for me to build in, and let's see how that pans out.
What about just the day to day?
So
yeah,
the day to day in the US, I think vastly different, right? In India, you have a lot of help at home. Living at home with family has been like instrumental to allowing me to really push how much we can work on this thing. So when I was in the US, I did some back of the napkin math, and I was spending about 40 hours a week doing things like cooking twice or thrice a day, cleaning, laundry, going to buy groceries, administrative things, going to UPS to return a package, right? Filing some form somewhere for something, some credit card bill, hospital bill. There's always something, right? If you live in the US, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's this undertone of angst that is constant and overhanging.
Did you ever feel like was H1B something that was on your mind at all times? Like, okay, at some point, this is something that's gonna end. Like being in the US, something that could end.
I mean, I got my H1B first try.
Okay.
So for me, like, fortunately, I did not have to go through a lot of the stress that many people have to go through. A lot of our friends are going through now.
Yeah.
This is the last attempt, right, for our batch in the US. If people applied, and if they did not get it, this was it. And so now they either have to do like day one CPT, they need to move to the UK, Canada, come back to India. So it's a big call, for sure. But I don't think H1B was like an overhang on my head because I got it first try. So luckily I did not have to think about it. It was an overhang when I was making this decision because I'm like, yeah, this could be really stupid, right? There's people who are waiting. A lot of people I spoke to were like, dude, you're crazy. You got your visa. Why are you doing this, right? People were like, man, like, you don't know what I would give to have like an H1B. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I completely get it. It's life-changing for certain people, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I was never really like that bothered about it. I was not obsessive about getting my visa. If I didn't get my visa, I'd be okay to go back.
Interesting. So there's something that I have recently been thinking about, which is what is a habit of mine that I have built into my life over, like, especially from like starting work after college, that has like exponentially like improved my life. And one of those things has just been literally, like, as simple as it sounds, like sleeping at the same time and waking up at the same time and just working out pretty much every day.
Yeah.
Is there any habit that you think has has been like a huge leverage in your life that has really improved your life?
So I think one habit is, I would say, it's not really a habit per se. I still falter on it. But like you said, having a routine. Never had a routine. I was the guy in college who would like sleep at 4, have an exam at 8, wake up at 7:30, go for the exam. Like there were.
You ever had the 5-hour energy?
No, not the 5-hour energy, but I've done crazy stuff, man. Like 7:30 if I had to wake up, right?
Yeah.
My alarm would be for 7. I would chug a Red Bull and then go back to sleep. And then when the Red Bull would hit, like 20 minutes later, I'd be like ready, like, let's go, right? So I've done like insane stuff to like stay awake. During my sophomore, junior year, pre-COVID, like there was some crazy stuff going on. Like there was no routine. There was nothing. Like your exams were and you're like, exams are over. Like, now I definitely don't want a routine. And so I think this idea of, you can laze around, wake up at 1 p.m., sleep at 3, 4, like that flexibility is giving you, is your time off, right? And so in your time off, you should do that because other times you are waking up at whatever, 8, sleeping at midnight. That idea sort of changed for me when I actually tried implementing it on a regular basis. And this was partly because of the health thing that I was talking about, right? And so I was really throwing the kitchen sink at it and trying everything. I was like, you know what? I am going to work out all the time. I'm going to eat completely clean. I'm going to sleep and wake up on time, and see if that helps. And more than the health thing, that was resolved through other ways and plus this. But more than the health thing, the noticeable change was like, I would say mental health just overall improves, right? Like when you have something to anchor your day around, that okay, I wake up, I do workout, and then I will have breakfast. I will go to the, speak to my parents and go to the office, right? And so that having that anchor is like really important for mental sanity. That's why in the US, it's like when you were feeling low, you hadn't left your house all day, you go buy groceries and come back, you're like, I do feel better, right? And so it's like just this idea of doing something, the familiarity of routine is like important. And so I have never been a very structured guy with anything. And so bringing in some structure on the front end and the back end of it at least has been really helpful.
What is, how would you describe the work culture that you noticed? Like now that you said there's 5 to 7 people that you're working with, there's a bunch of questions I have on hiring, but I'm more curious about how much do you care about, you hear culture used a lot, right? In US, of course, but like everywhere now, like people talk about culture. Is there something that you've actively thought about? Is the kind of culture you're building around the company?
Yeah.
What is that like? What is that thought been
absolutely, super important. I mean, a lot of, I haven't really seen much entrepreneurship in my family as such. And so all my learnings are through just people I look up to, the internet, whatever it may be.
Who are those people? Any names that come off the top of your head?
Just the top entrepreneurs, people who've, really made successful companies, grown them really big in the tech sphere, you're exposed to a lot of them all the time. But for me, the main thing was that like, I don't know, like looking up to people in the US, there's just this emphasis on having really great culture and really strong people at the earliest stages of your company. And it's obvious why that's true, right? Like that is not a hard thing to convince someone about, that if you want to build something great, it's never been done by a group of mediocre people. So you need to really assemble the Avengers, right? You need to really find the right people for the right things and do it at the right time. And so that in my mind was like priority number 1 when I came here. I was like, okay, I need to recruit a certain kind of person for a certain kind of role. And every time I recruit someone, I was thinking about how they fit into the ethos of like my value system. And more than me saying, oh, this will be the culture of the company, I think what's happened or what's ended up happening is like my value systems are sort of seeped through or seeped down into the way we interact with each other, the way we work together, everything that we do, right? How lenient I am, how strict I am, whether I'm shouting at people, whether I'm like nice to them, all of these things, I think these micro things make up the culture of a company. And then people pick up on that and then they take that as the new standard for how things are. And they interact with their peers and other people like that, right? And so if I show respect while scheduling meetings, people will show other people respect while scheduling meetings. So I think culture is extremely top down very early on and even later on, I think. Right. But that's sort of like how I think about culture. Is like initially I was like, I need to be explicit about it, right? Like culture. But then I was like, you know what? I think that the way things are going and the way it's seeping through is working really well for now, and so that's how we'll do it.
What do you think you spend too much time on right now? More than you want to?
Hiring. Like I wish hiring was more efficient in India in general.
What's the problem there?
The problem is that there are a lot of people who have a degree, but in terms of like they have the qualifications, but they don't have the qualifications. You know what I mean? And so you will see a resume that has a bunch of things on it. But when you talk to the person, the depth is like at times not there. So you end up having to sift through a lot to arrive at very little. And maybe the screening process we have needs to be improved significantly. Of course it does. Maybe my standards are skewed because I was surrounded by engineers at UIUC and now I'm recruiting from sort of all sorts of colleges, all sorts of standards. And so even if I'm talking about an IIT or a triple IT, right, and I'm talking to the kids there, it's not like in my head I was like, oh, every kid at IIT will be brilliant, right? Like that's the naive. But no, that's just not the case.
Same as any kid. Not every kid in Stanford will be.
Yeah. But I think the baseline is maybe a little bit higher or whatever it is, right? And so maybe IIT is testing for a different skill set, right? Like perseverance, hard work, dedication, determination. All of those things are important. But if I'm looking for a data engineer, right, like I need him to be a really good data engineer first. And of course, those other things are required, but if he's not a really good data engineer, but he's obedient and like really hardworking and stuff, like sure I can train him. It requires a lot of time from me, but I need somebody enterprising. And I think that the enterprising nature that you see a lot in the US, even with employees at companies, it's like not there here as much. There are people who are doing it, but those people do their own startup then. So it's like, it's like really hard to, it's like a tough problem to solve.
That is very interesting. What have you noticed about, what is the kind of person that is a good employee? Like, what are they doing?
I think it depends at different stages, right? Like if I was running a 50,000 people company, right? Like probably the most important thing about an employee then for somebody running a company like that is like, non-controversial, very straight to the line. They do the task they're assigned, they're timely, attendance, like basic stuff, right? But when you're at 5 people, it's like you're looking at different things, right? Like you want a lot of ownership and a lot of accountability. Like you want to bring a lot of smart people in a room and let them figure things out. You don't want to interfere a lot. You don't want to handhold them a lot.
And
right?
you've noticed that normally you have to do more handholding in India compared to the US.
So I think, and there's like a lot of this sir culture, right? Like, sir, I like have to do this, sir. But like, I don't know. I feel like people need to have more self-confidence at work, right? And I think that's been suppressed a little because the quality of managers at certain organizations may be questionable. They are not open to the people they are managing coming up with ideas, sort of, straying out of the lane a little bit, right? But so I have to like untrain that from a lot of people and say that, no, man, go crazy with it. Like, I don't want you to feel like everything has to be top down. It has to come from me. Like if I'm saying something and it sounds stupid, you have to tell me that. It can't be that, oh, sir, no, like, it's, that stuff doesn't work. So that has to be, I think that culture shift is coming in India, but definitely not as prevalent as you would find in the US.
What is it about that mindset in India? Like from a cultural standpoint, what do you see?
It's just always been like that. In school, we were in a really good school, private school. You were given the highest marks for being obedient, disciplined, straight arrow, that type of stuff. And so it wasn't like the outliers were rewarded. It wasn't like our system was pushing people to take risks. We are a very risk-averse society. I think that comes from like the scarcity mindset that's like just undertone in India, right? So that scarcity mindset leads to like very low-risk behavior from parents, like, bacha, just, do this, yaar. Or like teachers, like, beta, do this. And, but that's changing a little bit as prosperity happens in the country. People become more open to taking certain risks. Again, it's a culture thing, right? If the government is encouraging it, you are seeing a lot more success stories of people who have taken those risks. Then you become open to it. Like there is a private college in Delhi, engineering college. I have an intern who works with me from there, right? So some of those kids, they just like started a WhatsApp group that's like a coding community of sorts. They just help each other coding. That's how it started. Now they have like, thousands of people in this community, including some professionals. They host hackathons. They do all of this. Their professors from college are attending these hackathons and encouraging them to miss college time to, partake in these activities.
Wow.
Because that's the practical learning, right? Building a real project, presenting it to judges, getting feedback on it. I think the learning there is just vastly superior to sitting in a classroom and learning about computer science.
So if you were to, like, let's say there's 2 people right now. There's these 2 kids. One of the kids is like, let's say a 4.0 GPA.
Yeah.
And there's another kid that's had like 10 different projects, but they're like 3.13
Right.
GPA.
Yeah.
Are you naturally inclined towards the person with the projects?
It really depends on what the projects are, right? So if the 4 GPA guy has like never done anything outside class, he has sort of performed really well in class, is a smart guy, I'll have a conversation with him and like see what his personality is like. That's really important with these like 100% type people, is like, what is the personality, right? Can you break out of this shell and get into the nitty gritties of things, or is this purely an academic person? And so the other person, a lot of projects. Now, as long as those projects are not frivolous, there's some impressive stuff there, right? Always prefer somebody who's done that, right? Like if I am hiring somebody to build a website, right? Do I want to hire somebody who's taken a class in front-end design, in graphic design, whatever it is, web development? Or do I want to hire somebody who like started a side hustle and makes websites for like his mom's small business, for his cha-cha, his mama. The websites look good. They're not amazing, but they look good. I'm like, yeah, of course. It's like at this early stage, you know, that kid is infinitely more valuable.
Yeah. You need more, in some ways, journalists that are kind of, I mean, they know their stuff, but then they're really fine with
They're just
looking at other stuff.
enterprising.
Yeah.
And they can like do stuff. They don't come to you with the first problem. You know, what happens a lot is like people come to you with the first problem they face. Right? Like at an early stage startup, you want somebody who does not come to you with a problem at all, ideally. That's not possible. So what happens is you want a guy who faces the first problem, says, okay, I faced this problem, I did this, I solved it, and then I ran into this problem, which I then tried this for. This one kind of worked, but what are your thoughts on this? And like that is like a more productive way to approach somebody for help than say that, hey man, I'm stuck. What do I do?
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of that.
Is there a question there that you have noticed in the interviews that you've done that has been good to ask? That's kind of shown the person's, let's say, like more on the personality side.
So I think during interviews, I copy all my questions, like straight up. I just look at interview questions that I think are great and I find them online and I use them because I like the framework of thinking. One that I recently liked was, you know, asking somebody, what is it that you are the absolute best at? Right? Like if you, Sarthak Kaul, had to tell me something that you are the absolute best at, take a minute to think about it, don't answer for a minute, and then give me a 2-minute explanation of what it is that Sarthak Kaul is like a complete expert at. Right? I think that is a good question to tell you like the level at which the person is thinking, right? And what they think of themselves. Right? Like, are they saying I'm a good like front end engineer, I do like React really well? Or are they like, you know, I have really, really good product sense. And I think that is like fundamentally my strongest point. And I bring that to sort of everything I do, whether it's front end engineering or if I'm giving you feedback on something. I think I have a very holistic understanding of connecting the business side of things with the product that I'm creating. I'm not merely taking a UI design and implementing it.
Yeah.
I sort of understand that stack, and that is something that's very rare for front end engineers. And so that is something that I think I'm like really good at. You know, so those kind of questions really show you the delta in the kind of candidates you're speaking to. Another one is like, you know, famous Tesla question, what is the hardest thing you've done in your life? Right? Could be technical, non-technical, whatever it is. That really helps understand, you know, the background of the person. What do they consider hard?
Yes.
Right? If the hardest thing they say is like, you know, whatever, you get the point.
No, those are two excellent questions. I want to ask you a little bit more about India because I feel like a lot of conversations so this little bit background is like, I remember clearly, this is like so clear in my mind, 2017, when we both went to college, I remember meeting new people on campus. I went to UCSD. There were like, you know, people from all over, and we would start, you know, introducing ourselves. And normally I would just say like, you know, my name and like I'm from Delhi or whatever. And, you know, the conversation would move on from there to whatever they're doing. And I generally try to ask questions. So normally it's the other person talking. But I've noticed over the past 2 to 3 years, pretty much since COVID, that whenever I've met people in the US, I live in Austin. Maybe Austin's generally more open as well, more curious. I tell them from where I'm from, and that conversation goes much deeper into what's happening in India. Almost like every time I've been asked more questions about India as what's happening there. I've heard there's like a lot of startups, all this stuff.
Sure.
So I'm curious about, do you consider, I mean, I saw you just voted as well. Do you consider, to what extent do you consider yourself to be patriotic?
I mean,
how do you show it as well?
It's a tough question. I mean, I think India is a unique place, and every day I'm grateful that this is where I was born, right? Like, I could have been born anywhere, and it could have been very different. And I think India is, if you are not from India, born in India, you can't understand India at that level, right? You can come here, you can spend 5 years here as a foreigner, you will never understand India, right? And so that, to me, is like this exclusive club, right? And so call that patriotism, whatever you want to call it. but I think there's like definitely an amount of pride there where you want that to be part of your personality, right? The fact that you are from India. Indians are very passionate about that. We're Indian, right? We see Indian stuff happen outside India, and we're like, yeah, let's go India.
Yeah.
Right? And
All the CEOs are Indian. Let's go.
yeah, all like this obsession about these CEOs who may have been born and raised in the US. Like, we'll take credit for it. Like, whatever. This is just like, so I think to that extent, yes, like I would consider myself to be patriotic.
Interesting. What's something that you miss about the US right now?
Man, I mean, the US is just, it's different. Like the energy is different. The speed and velocity in any major city in the US is incomparable to a city anywhere else in the world, like that I've been to. Right, nowhere in Europe for sure. Delhi is chaotic and busy, but when I talk about speed and agility, right, it's not there, right?
Have you? How would you describe Gurgaon to people? I'm sure like you've had this conversation with people there where,
of course, they're like, where are you from? Like,
and
Delhi.
you're like, Delhi.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
yeah.
I'm actually not from there, but what would you say is unique about Gurgaon?
I mean, I just say it's a suburb of Delhi. So if you think of Delhi as like the business capital of, where everything's going on, Gurgaon is sort of the branch of corporates. That's why you see a lot more corporate bias. People living here, most people are doing jobs at companies. Of course, now a lot of business people. But Delhi is, a lot more business. So I think Gurgaon sort of branched off from this need for, office space. When I moved to Gurgaon, there was barely anything here. Right? There was jungle.
When did you move? You moved?
When I was 4 or 5, I don't know, something like that. But it was a jungle. I remember I used to stay in Richmond Park. You look back from the balcony, there was nothing. Now when you look out from the balcony, you can't see anything because there's a building. And but no, phase 4, phase 5, like these are all new things. Like they're 10, 15 years old, you know. Now golf course extension has gone crazy. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening, right? And a lot of the younger companies, if you want to call it that, your Paytms and Zomatos, and they all have offices in Gurgaon. A lot of the initial American companies that were setting up shops in India had their offices in Gurgaon. So my dad we used to live in Noida, and so he used to do Noida Gurgaon every day for years, like several years.
That's over 2 hours.
Yeah, and so until maybe traffic wasn't that bad then, but the highway did not exist.
Right.
So it was MG Road. But I remember that being like a long drive. And so eventually you were like, okay, you know what, like it makes sense to move to Gurgaon. And yeah, now Gurgaon has just exploded. So for me, I have seen Gurgaon from zero.
Yeah.
I would say, maybe the Laburnum and Silver Oaks crowd in Gurgaon may have seen it from -1. But like, I would say, yeah, like pretty early on.
I moved to Gurgaon in 2003. I mean, probably the same time, 4 or 5 years age. And my house is kind of close to. So the story behind Gurgaon is like the reason it started exploding from the beginning, before the business, was Maruti Suzuki.
Sure, yeah.
It's like Maruti and then a Japanese company called Suzuki. They wanted to set up a shop, manufacturing unit. They set it up in Gurgaon.
Yeah.
So my house is like 10 minutes from there.
Sure.
And so I just saw like that part was the first place to start getting kind of like inhabited by people. And now it's just like it's own. It's just now it's oversaturated.
No, it's a proper city. Like it is a metropolitan city.
Yeah.
It's full of young people.
Yeah.
I think it's in India one of the best places to live.
100%.
Right. The kind of options you have in terms of where you want to stay at all price points. The options you have for entertainment, dining, any sort of consumption. Right. It's been great living in Gurgaon and like seeing this exponential growth.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit of a, I guess, deeper question, but I feel like you're very curious. You've always been curious, but now I'm noticing, like, just from talking to you, you think a lot in questions. Even when you're answering, you try to come up with questions to think about and then answer those questions yourself. Like right now, when you were just talking, you were just saying, so what do you like? What would that look like? And this, that. So, where do you think your curiosity comes from? like there's so many different interests you have, and you probably still have them. Do you identify with anything? Like, do you identify as a curious person? Is that something you think about?
So I don't actively think about it as such. Like, it's not like I'm a curious person. I want to know stuff.
Because very few people are genuinely curious. Like, if you notice around, like it's not a huge market for curiosity.
I don't know. I mean, I guess, yeah. And I think now in this short form consumption era, it's like you constantly get bombarded with small bits and pieces of knowledge, right? Which you think you are like learning something, so it feels great. When somebody explains something to you in like 10 seconds, you're like, I feel a little bit smarter.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit smarter.
Yeah.
Right? Like that feeling is like the dopamine hit is really nice. And so in this era, I think even pre this, right? My curiosity probably came from just a lot of exposure in my youth. Like I said, a lot of different disparate hobbies. Right. So very early on, I was dipping my finger in a bunch of things, and I liked all of it. It wasn't like I tried it and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Like the most things that I tried, I kind of understood why people like it, right? And so that was like really nice for me because I could get into any topic or field or conversation with somebody and be like, that's interesting. I understand why you are interested in that. Like medicine is like my sort of secret interest, if you want to call it that, right? One of my best
by
friends
medicine, what do you mean? Like
just doctory, like literally
Okay.
doctory, right? So if it didn't take 20 years to become a doctor and like I had more rigor, I would definitely be a doctor.
you can be a
Right, like-
content creator doctor, bro.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think random fields, right? One of my best friends is a doctor now. And him and I talk about it sometimes, but more than that, yeah, I have like random disparate interests, and that's what keeps me curious. Like I think it's just you just have a wonderful opportunity to be here, right? So you might as well like
Look into whatever you're interested.
yeah, like it's like you're on the GTA map, right? And like, why do you want to explore a small part of it? Like you want to sort of
Yeah.
see the entire. Like when you download GTA, what's the first thing you do? You like go on a spin, like see the whole map,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like, what's behind this mountain? Like, let's go
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so a little bit of that.
Do you think of life as a game?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting you ask that. Like, one of my favorite non-fiction books that was a perspective shifter. Like, I don't think books. Like, I use books to learn certain things, change perspectives a little bit, but no perspective shifters like that, right? Nothing intense. But this one book I did read was by Brian Greene, right? Like he's a physicist, well-renowned, written several books, right? And this one book in particular was focused on a few different things. One was free will, an explanation of space-time as we know it today, or what we understand. Religion and its place in all of this science, why it's existed for 3,000 years, and what importance that has. So there are a lot of these topics that were covered in that, right? And I think the takeaway from it was just the insignificance of humankind, and the Fermi paradox. Like, why is there nobody else out there that we found? And so it might just be that like there is a very real possibility that this is just a flicker of life in very long, unthinkable span of time, right? And so in that, to be so serious about certain things like doesn't make sense to me. And
Yeah.
before that, maybe I was like a lot more serious. But after that, the perspective shift was that, you know what, it's a single player game, right? And it's up to you how much of this map you want to explore, right? And so that's where some of the ambition also came, right? Where I was like, you know what, you get one try at this. If you got one shot at a game, you would not really go that easy, right? You would sort of try to see what you can do, what level you can reach, all of that. And so that perspective shift happened where I was like, you know what, I do want to give this a shot, and like I can take a lot more risk, and it really doesn't matter. It is what it is. Will the experience be more fun than like staying at my job? For sure. And so it was like as simple as that.
That's amazing, dude. I mean, I think we need more of that thinking because we take failure too seriously.
Yeah, but I get it, man. Like, I mean, I think for me, my background also allows me to take disproportionate risk. And my family is extremely supportive. So I understand situations where people cannot take that risk, right? And so I do respect that as well. I don't think everybody should be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I agree. I think I do wish that people would like there are a lot of people I know personally who I think are extremely talented in one way or another, and that way may not be the one that's being expressed the best at their current job, right? And so in my conversations, I'm like, dude, you should give this a shot.
Did you feel that way as well in your job?
So I don't know if I felt that way. I think my job was giving me a lot of autonomy. So I was working at like a small consulting shop where we built AI solutions, data engineering solutions for clients in different industries, different verticals. So I had a lot of exposure to vast variety of different things. And it was great for me because I was like, yes, I want to build this for healthcare, or I want to build this for a financial service organization, or build this for an e-commerce brand, right? And so brainstorming new solutions for all those things was great. And I had a lot of autonomy. After a year and a half of experience, I was like given a lot of authority on how I wanted to shape a project, the requirements, everything, right? But at the same time, it was different from a startup because there are always constraints that are externally enforced. So I can ask a client what it is that they want. I can ask a client, oh, does this look good? Right? I can ask my boss, like, oh, can we do it like this? Right? I can tell somebody, oh, you should do it like this. So there's all of these constraints that are defined, right? You get a paycheck also. And so in the startup world, there is no client as such right now, at least in the earliest stages. There is nobody who you can go to and say like, hey, can you give me a requirements and specifications document of what you want, and like we'll make it for you. So that is gone. Second is like there is no boss. Obviously there are mentors and stuff, but there's no boss who I can go to and say, I'm thinking about it like this. Do you think this is the right macro call, or you should go about it a different way? Nobody with a wealth of experience coming and telling you that. So those are like the stark differences. And employees as well, right? Like sometimes you will tell your employees things that don't pan out, right? And that is a call that I made, or somebody who is leading a team like that makes. And those calls can often turn out to be wrong. Like, hey guys, we're going to spend 2-3 weeks working on this feature. And then after 2-3 weeks, you realize that, this is really not it. But you've learned a lot as a founder, and you've gotten a lot of data and information that hopefully will let you make something that is closer to the needs of what people really want, right? But to relay that information to your team is very hard, because now the team has said that, yeah, I worked on this for 3 weeks, right? Now you're telling me to scrap it, right? That for a salaried employee feels really bad. If it happened to me, I would feel bad, right? That, hey, this consulting project you were on, that thing that you made for the client, they don't want it.
Yeah.
We're going to scrap it.
Yeah. Start over all over
again. You still
again.
get paid for whatever you did, but like, we're going to throw that away.
Yeah.
And so that hard, right? Very hard.
How do you handle that?
It's hard. Like it's not. I don't think I have an answer for it yet. I think it's a challenging perspective, and I think the right kind of people in your team is important because they get it.
Yes.
You don't have to talk to them and babysit them and be like, hey man, this is how we're doing this. They get it. They're like, yeah, let's give this a shot. And if they come up with something and they think that my way of doing it is not right, I'm like, okay, we'll give it a shot. And I won't say I told you so if it's wrong. But if it works out, that's amazing. But if it doesn't work out, I'll do the same for you, right? I'll sort of help you out the same way you helped me out.
Yes.
Running these experiments.
Yeah.
And so I think just being open-minded about that, like having the right people, that perspective is really important.
There's two things that I think you mentioned in this conversation that are kind of big takeaways. One is choosing the right kind of people around you early on is super important. And that comes from understanding who you are before anything else. Like
Absolutely.
That conversation on culture cannot happen without understanding what your natural proclivity, how you behave is. Because you said culture is basically the set of actions and behaviors that you do every day.
Absolutely.
That just goes on to the rest of the people. The other thing you said, I think, which could resonate with a bunch of people is, I think there's a lot of people with many interests.
Right.
And they find it very hard to choose one, or just try to choose which direction to take, especially early on when you're trying to... Same. And I think one place to start is to be in a situation or an environment where you can actually pursue those interests. For example, consulting. I think like being in that sort of situation, like being in that sort of environment, you are able to at least dive into some of those things and
Right.
figure out if this is actually something that you're interested in or
Right.
is something you just think about you're interested in.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, I was not one of those software engineers who was clear out of school that I wanted to do back-end engineering or, you know, whatever, you pick your stack or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
So for me, this was also like, okay, I get to play around with a bunch of things, understand how tech is applied to a variety of different industries, right? Implement it. So not just interface with the clients, but actually take part in the implementation, lead the implementation, the delivery, the maintenance, right? Like take ownership of it. Work in really small teams, 1 to 4 people max, and yeah, deliver something awesome. And so that experience, like you said, yeah, very valuable in helping me understand myself, my strengths, my weaknesses, my interests. You know what I should double click into. So yeah, definitely very helpful. Putting yourself in a situation where, you know, if you're not sure, you can definitely always find an environment where it'll guide you to being more sure. So you don't have to pick the right thing.
Yes.
Just pick the thing that'll give you information that
Yes.
can help you understand what you like.
Yes.
Like that's how I would put it.
Yeah, being directionally more correct is it's more important to be directionally moving in something that you feel like you could go into than
Yeah,
like knowing
yeah.
exactly. I feel like
And the second part of that is really important, which is moving. Where
Yes.
sometimes you can be in the same spot, looking left, then turning right, looking straight, and then turning back around. But it's really important that once you pick a direction, you're always moving.
Yes.
That for me was like a big, because I was always in this like analysis paralysis mode, right? With curiosity and all of this, it also comes
Yes.
that side of it is really so I would say that, you know, what helped me was understanding that taking the smallest step is still taking a step. And when you take a lot of small steps, you know, 10 months later, 6 months later, you'll be really far away from where you started. And going back to, you know, what Akhil was saying, my brother, where he was like, during COVID, you know, we were working out at home. What I told, because he was like, you know, the gym is shut and, you know, what am I going to do? I've like lost all this weight. And this was before my own health issues, right? And so I told him that, look, man, like, it's not important to go get an hour-long workout in and then have a protein shake and have everything optimized, right? Like, even if we do just 10 push-ups, right? Do 10 pull-ups and then do like 10, 20 sit-ups.
Yes.
Do 3 sets of those.
Yes.
Let's call it a day at that, right? So I told him the first time we worked out, I was like, you know what? Let's do 5 minutes. We did 5 minutes for a week. We used to put books on the ground, legs on the bed, do some push-ups, do whatever.
Yeah.
And 5 minutes, literally for 1 week, I was like, do not go over 5 minutes because then you're going to say, I'm sore, this hurts, I don't want to do this. Just do 5 minutes. I tell my mom the same thing. She's like, you know, I have this health issue or I have this pain, I have this, whatever it is, right? And I'm like, just do the bare minimum, like the absolute bare minimum, right? And you'll see how that compounds. And the human brain, rightly said by several people, is like very, very bad at understanding compounding. And the health effects. And after my COVID, this thing I told you, right? Like I just completely switched off the gym and I was like, I don't want to go. But the doctor said, you need to do some stuff, right? So I went and I would do like 10 minutes on a recumbent bike, which to me, at my peak fitness would seem like not even a proper warm-up, right? And so I was like, this seems useless.
Yeah.
But it was useful. It
Yeah.
told me that I can be in the gym every day. It, you know, helped me build a stronger baseline to go do more important, difficult things. But it's really important to like directionally be correct and also just keep taking some steps. You should keep getting more information, more confidence, and you can just keep going. So that's how I am doing this. Like this is an uncertain journey, right? And I don't know what is ahead. There are a lot of risks. And so the way I'm navigating is by just taking one step forward at a time. And you look back 2-3 months and you're like, wow, we've really done all of that. And that was really helpful.
Dude, that's awesome. One, I have 2 more questions. One is you talked about having mentors to guide you. You know, there's these steps, certain things that we have to take individually. Certain things like health, for example. Even there, you can find people that are like a few steps ahead of you in the way that you want to like be when it comes to being physically fit.
Absolutely.
How is there any one person or one mentor that has like been the most important right now in this journey?
So I don't think there's ever like one person.
Yeah.
Like you know, you'd asked me who I looked up to in school. It's very similar now. Like there are people in my personal life who I look up to for certain things. Like my parents, obviously my brother. There are qualities about them that I I would like to pick up on, make stronger in my personality. And it goes the other way also. So there are people where I see a quality, I'm like, that is not pleasant.
Do not need to
Right.
do that. Yeah.
And I can see myself a little bit in that, and I'm like, okay, I can see where in a situation in the past I may have acted like that, and now I can see how it comes across, right? So that is something that I do not want to do. And obviously, like, the person and the action are different things, right? And so if one action of theirs is like not good, obviously that is something that I can take from them and say that, okay, I want to fix this. Perfectly fine person, but it goes both ways. So look up to certain qualities in people, and notice qualities in people that you don't like, why you don't like them, and if that can help you sort of just become a better person.
Normally, I've noticed in my own like observations that when I praise someone, like someone for how they are, like their certain behaviors or qualities, and when I don't like something about someone, it's typically, as you said, like reflections of what I actually value in myself.
Yeah.
What are certain things that you have, like, what is something that's been really hard for you to change about you that you're proud to have changed now?
So I think it's been very hard for me to change like my emotional quotient. I don't think I always had a high emotional quotient.
Okay.
Part of it was, going through the whole health thing myself. That was like a big perspective shifter for me, definitely. I didn't understand mental health issues much before that. I think most people who've never had anxiety don't understand anxiety. It's very hard to explain. But just having that experience helped me develop a higher emotional quotient and sensitivity towards people, sensitivity towards situation, background, lived experiences. So that was definitely very helpful. I think before that, I could be crass, I could be dismissive, I could be I don't know, Akhil put it, hard ass for no reason, like just purely ego or whatever, right? Like, I don't know what it was, but it's not like I'd done anything. I was like 19 years old. Like what could I have done?
Yeah.
Right. And so to have that sort of a personality that young, I think looking back on it was not it. And so now I just feel a lot lighter, frankly.
Yes.
I'm living a lot less in my head.
Yes.
So that change was really difficult. And I worked on it. I had a long relationship. That really helped. When you're
That always helps.
Yeah, your close proximity to a woman, she sort of softens your edges a little bit, tells you off when things are. And so even when that started, I was like completely different person, right? And so there's been a complete 180 in that aspect.
Wow. Dude, last question here. This might be a sort of bigger question, but
Sure.
Is there anything you've really, beyond Bynd, what have you thought of as the impact you want to have? Is there anything that comes to mind? Like, what's the kind of world you want to leave behind?
But I don't know if the impact we're talking about is at that scale. Obviously, I would love to. I would love to help as many people as possible in the greatest way possible. Now, I don't know what the path to doing that is. I think I'm very, very, very early in that journey. Right. And what we're doing with Bynd is just like a small part of that. We'll see what it becomes. We want to go really big with it. And it's going to be really hard. But if that does materialize into something fruitful, I think that gives me a lot of leverage to do a lot of good from there. Right. And I think the maximally impactful way of helping people is by, just doing your best at what you're doing. And if you do sort of grow it to be something big, right, that sort of gives you the opportunity to help a lot more people. And so in terms of that, yeah, like, I mean, I don't think it's the right time for me to say what scale of impact I want to have. It's way too early. But
you're thinking big.
Yeah, absolutely. If you aren't, then like, what am I doing? Then I should do something else.
So is there, last question, is there any advice that you have to, like, just a younger version of you who's maybe like 4 years younger than you, just like to your brother, what would you say?
Sure. I mean, I think 4 years younger is like fairly recent. I was 21, just graduated college. But even then, right, I just entered the workspace, a lot of unknowns, first time working in corporate America alone, living alone. I would just say think bigger. I think people, the scale at which you think is determined by the environments you grew up in. And so if you have seen, somebody build a startup that served 1 million people, then that's your benchmark. You're like, that's as big as it gets, right? That doesn't mean that is as big as it gets. That is just the biggest you've seen. And so you've set your bar there, right? I was doing a lot of that, where I was like, my goal setting was determined by what I'd seen. And I realized that I've not seen that much. And so your goal setting can be independent of your environment and how you've grown up. Your goal setting can be way more ambitious. Your goal setting can be way bigger than what your surroundings may dictate or what you may have seen. So to younger people or to my younger self, all I would say is that like that is just a mental shift of what the standard can be for yourself or what you want to do, right? It could be anything. You want to be an artist, you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to do anything. It's just you can think so much bigger in all these ways, and like life can be so much more fulfilling if you can actually pursue that and achieve it. And that pursuit of it just seems really interesting to me. And so I hope that my hope would have been like my younger self would have been more would have thought bigger and had more self-confidence.
Awesome, man. Thank you, bro.
Of course. Thank you for having me.